Thanks very much. So, bit of a last-minute talk, as you can see, no slides. Bear with me. I'm going to talk about PowerShell without having PowerShell to show you. So, a little bit about me before we start off. I'm currently a senior pen tester at NCC Group. I've been pen testing for about 5 years, and I really enjoy writing little bits of code that end up on the internet doing various things. This being one of them. So it's going to start off a little bit as a war story. I warn you, not a very exciting one. And like all good war stories, this one starts off with a Windows build review. So sitting there, I'm doing this build review and looking at the scope, making sure I've got final coverage, and notice that this customer has decided to add a little bit onto the end of the description of a build review that's not normally there. And that's, hi, we want full segregation testing done from the host that you're reviewing. And this is obviously last day of the test. I'm like, okay, sweet. Let's put some tools on the machine, run them off, and then we can sort of give a reasonable sort of idea of what we can see from that point in the network. What I didn't realize when I started the job and then got to this point was, we were playing sort of serverception. So I think I had to go through a Citrix environment, then RDP into a jump host, switch to a host, and then use that host to then access the host that I was reviewing. And it got to the point where I'm sat on this box and they want me to do segregation testing. I'm not allowed to install anything. There is nothing on the box other than pretty much a bare bones Windows installation. And yeah, where do we go from here? So normally I'd start off with running something like Nmap, going out to the various networks I know are there and seeing if I can reach across. Obviously, I can't install Nmap. Nmap's not there. So next thing I think of, okay, I'll ping. I'll ping out to some hosts on some other networks, other subnets, see what I can see. The issue with that is obviously you can configure hosts not to respond to ping. So actually that told me nothing. If anything, it just told me that it's either not there or somebody's configured these not to show up, which makes my life a little bit difficult. Now, the client was very focused on RDP access in this instance, so they wanted the full segregation testing, but they were primarily concerned about, can you RDP from this box? I don't know if it was a workstation or a server at this point. I've gone through so many layers. Can you RDP from that onto any other host on the network that it shouldn't be able to see? So that was fairly easy to test. You just open up the Windows RDP client, put in a bunch of IPs one by one, see if it makes a connection. Got through that. Everything looked pretty good. Couldn't reach anything. But then it came down to, okay, well, I can provide that assurance. What can I do about the rest of it? So I thought, okay, I'm on Windows. I have administrator access. The only reason I can't install my tools is because I'm not allowed to, and also getting stuff over to the box is a bit of a pain, jumping through like 4 hurdles. So I thought, okay, Windows, PowerShell. So I open up PowerShell, and sure enough, yep, I can run commands, I've got the permissions. So I go to Google and I type in PowerShell Portscanner, and thinking, there'll be loads, I'll just take my pick off GitHub. Someone's written it. And what I got back was one tutorial repeated across about 20 different websites under different names and different authors, but identical text, identical code. I couldn't find anything on GitHub, and I was really surprised. So I sort of bodged together from this tutorial something that vaguely resembled a port scanner. It was atrocious. I deleted it immediately, never wanted to see it again, would never give that to anyone. But I walked out of that engagement and thought, this has got to be a common problem. If nobody's written this tool, there's got to be people in the same situation. I know I end up server hopping 4 levels at a time. A lot of the time. Granted, I don't always have to do segregation testing, but somebody's got to. So I got a bit of free time around January this year, and I sat down, I thought, right, I'm going to take that tutorial that I started with, and I'm going to develop it into a fully functional tool that someone can just copy and paste onto a Windows machine, run it in PowerShell, and hopefully have a much nicer time than I did. So I started off pretty basic, TCP connection. Yeah, Pretty easy to do. You can do it in about 5 lines. If you're being fancy, you can probably do it in 1 if you really want to. I had a look around PowerShell commandlets, so turning a script into something that resembles an actual application. You can go, oh yeah, help, and it gives you all the options, things like that, which is, as somebody who's never touched PowerShell in their life until this point, it was really interesting to see that you can do all that through comments. PowerShell actually interprets your comments and will generate documentation for you based on your comments out of the box. Yeah, there's a great function called get help. You call that on a PowerShell script, it will get help, pretty much. So basically, as I went along, I was just adding stuff in the comments at the top of the page, and I was self-generating documentation, which is great. Lots of people really like writing tools. Nobody likes writing documentation. So if you can document as you go just by writing the code, it makes your life a whole lot easier, and it's much nicer to share at the end of it. So yeah, I went through, so I thought, okay, basic TCP connection. What do I want to do with this? Okay, I want to specify a port. Okay, so I can take in a port, and I can scan this, do a TCP connection, see what comes back. And I thought, that's great. But TCP is not the only thing. You've got UDP as well. So, okay, so how do I do this with UDP? And the tutorial that I originally found, the UDP scanner was touch and go at best. I tried it on some machines that I had access to that I knew exactly what ports were running, and 9 times out of 10 it wouldn't pick up an open UDP port. So I had a look around at some of the tools that we normally use, and I came across I was looking at UDP Proto Scanner. I think that's the name off the top of my head. UDP Proto Scanner. Yeah, and they very kindly include a list of the payloads that they use on their GitHub page. So I went, okay, that's nice, I'll have those. Took them, realised that, okay, they need some sort of weird encoding to actually receive a response. It's not just copy this text, send it in a connection, and get your nice response back. So once I worked out exactly what encoding and things were going on and managed to replicate that, I managed to get something that gave me the results I expected on the host that I had. I'm not going to go out there and say, yes, this UDP port scanner that I've cobbled together in PowerShell is great and it'll detect everything and you should use it for everything, and Nmap's bad, because it's not. But I was getting more reliable results, and I thought, I've not seen this anywhere. All of the UDP examples I'd found were this touch and go 90% failure rate sort of code. So at this point, I was like, great, I've got TCP and I've got UDP and I can specify a port. Now that's great, and it would have been really nice to have, but if you're looking for a tool to do a job, you're probably not just going to want to test a single port at a time. So I went through and I looked at Nmap, and I looked at the options that Nmap offer. And it's things like using port ranges or specifying multiple ports at a time. And expanded on the feature list, gradually adding things in, researching and learning PowerShell as I went. Please don't ask me technical PowerShell questions, because it's all gone from my head the second I submitted that code to GitHub and was like, it works. People using it, it's good. I don't need to know this anymore. But yeah, and then it ended up about 1,000 lines of code, which if you'd have shown that to me 2 months prior and said, hey, here's this 2,000 line PowerShell script that you've written, I would have told people that's never going to happen, you've got the wrong person. So another lesson here, I guess, is don't be scared to try a new language. Don't be scared to try scripting. If you know nothing, Google is your friend. If you've got a goal you want to accomplish, work towards that. You don't need to know a language to program a solution. You can program a solution and learn the language by programming that solution, which I wish somebody told me at university instead of going, learn code and leave me to it. I was like, that's great, if or else, whatever. How do I actually turn this into something that I'm actually going to use? But yeah, so anyway, I produced this tool. It's now available on GitHub. My GitHub username is JamesConlan96. Same username pretty much across all platforms. So Twitter, I'm on
LinkedIn post about it as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I post it on everywhere. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Mastodon at infosec.exchange, if any of you are on that. But yeah, so it's posted on there, it's pinned on my profile if you want to find it. That's probably the easiest way to get it without me putting a link up, which doesn't look like I can right now because I don't have a laptop. But yeah, if anybody's got any sort of questions, ask away. Yeah.
Before you
hang on.
Does it work? Okay.
Maybe not.
Just out of curiosity, have you tried to recreate the same program in a artificial intelligence to see if there's any improvements or errors with their version?
I have not. No. I mean, I don't really have the time to do that now, sadly. But it's a lot of the time. It's, hey, I've got an idea. I've got a tool that I want to produce that's going to help me and probably going to help other people. Spend all the time getting that out the door, and then work comes flooding in, and I'm back to testing 24/7.
Any other questions?
I don't know how you use the tools if you've made it or if it's been.
So personally, I have not had to touch this tool since I wrote it. Other people have. I've had colleagues message me out of the blue. I've been sat away working, and I get this Teams message pop up going, "Hi, you know this tool that you wrote? How do I do this?" And I have to go, "Let me just check the documentation because I don't remember." And then I go, "Oh yeah, this isn't in the documentation. Right, how do I do this? Right, let's fix it. Let's update the documentation." And yeah, I've had people both internally at my company and externally, people on LinkedIn, Twitter, and that reach out to me and say, "Hey, this saved me in the situation," basically. So it's nice to know that it works and that it's done a little bit of good, if nothing else.
I've got a question actually, and I can't put my hand up, so I've got the microphone. So would you say that the learning curve with PowerShell was much quicker than languages such as Python and things like that? I mean, you've obviously achieved quite a lot in a short time there from a base sort of start.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I primarily program in Python. So coming from someone who knows Python, going into PowerShell, it was fairly intuitive. Personally, I think Python is still easier to learn than PowerShell, but it's personal preference, really. It's still pretty intuitive. If you know English, you can read the code and try and work out exactly what's going on. There's loads of documentation. It's Microsoft. They like to document everything. It's great.
Thank you.
Right here.
Did any ideas identify the traffic? Because you produce some traffic instead of
So I mean, we weren't really looking at what traffic was going across. There wasn't. I didn't get any SOC alerts or anything sent my way going what was going on. I didn't design it to be, oh yeah, hackers use this, it will get past all the network sensors and everything.
it was a kind of stealth?
Yeah, so I didn't design it for stealth. There are some things in there that could help you with stealth, but it's not designed to be undetectable. I didn't really want to write something that was completely undetectable because that could really easily be misused, and I'm putting it out there on the internet for anyone to download. So,
except for TCP, UDP, but other protocols do you use?
So the TCP, UDP, you can ping, so ICMP, but that specific message. Yeah, and then you can do trace routes through it, because that was researching PowerShell. That seemed to be really easy. It was a one line to trace route, so I thought, I'll add a trace route option in. Save you running multiple commands, it just does it as part of the scan if you wanted to. There's a couple of predefined scan profiles, so you can just give it one thing. So I think there's like -- quick, and it will use a predefined scan profile to scan things. Like Nmap does, when you run it without any arguments, it will use default settings, things like that.
Does it support SNMP or?
No. There might actually be some payloads for UDP in there that support those certain protocols. So again, I took all the UDP payloads from UDP Protoscanner. So everything is listed, everything's referenced on the GitHub page. I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah, they go into detail about what what payloads support what protocols and things.
Any more questions? The result of the scan. The result of the scan, is it just on console or saved to file as well?
Yeah, so by default it'll just print to the console, but it has got options for text or JSON output. So if you want to put it through some sort of parser or write your own parser, JSON is pretty easy to parse. That was my idea. I didn't want to sit and write a parser, but I was like, if people want to parse this, then JSON's a nice format for them to use, so I'll put a JSON output in there.
Any further questions?
What other delights can we find in your
Sorry?
What other delights can we find in your GitHub?
What other delights can we find on my GitHub? There's a few things. I've got one called GTFOB lookup, which is, if you've ever heard of GTFO bins, it's basically a database of Linux binaries that you'd find commonly on Linux systems and how you can exploit them to be hacking tools. But it searches various databases like that. So there's one for Windows, one for Linux. There's one for, I think, DLL files specifically. There's all sorts. So I've just sort of collated these databases and built a sort of, I guess, a search engine for them on top. So a couple of things just to make things easier, like merging Nessus files, configuring proxy chains, things like that. But they're all little scripts that I've written I thought people might like. Not things that I'm like raving about and giving talks about, but there's a few little things on there that I've, from time to time, I'll add a little script that I found useful.
Make this to-do list.
Yeah.
You can add.
Yeah, okay, I see.
Cool. Any questions?
Are you based in Reading?
Am I based in Reading?
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
There's the NCC in the field.
That's not where I'm based, no. Thanks very much.
Right, on that basis, can I just please request a massive round of applause for this guy who's done no preparation.